Alright guys, TacticalRab back again today. Hope you're all doing well and enjoying your day so far. Shotzzy has revealed that Ghosty has stepped into the in-game leadership position for the OpTic Texas team, and that Shotzzy certainly prefers the situation as it is now compared to what they were like with iLLeY in terms of getting the most out of this roster going forwards. Very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always, I'd greatly appreciate it. Plenty we're going to dive into today. Firstly, wanted to mention, I think I missed this a few days ago, so I thought I would point it out for you guys if you are local to Florida and want to attend this. So for their match this weekend against the Boston Breach, Mutinies will be hosting a live watch party at their headquarters. Pretty interesting stuff, limited seats available. I'm guessing this is going to be like the players are there in the room and you can sit and watch in front of them type of thing, kind of like what Toronto did a while ago now. So Minnesota kind of pioneered this in a way. They've got a couple of things coming up, I believe in April and then in May for some of their later home series in Minnesota, or one of them's in Minnesota, one of them's in Wisconsin, I think. But the Minnesota one, they're actually bringing the teams they play to Minnesota or Wisconsin to play the games there, whereas this is kind of like Mutineers are still playing this match against Boston online, but you can kind of just watch there in person. I'm sure, you know, food and drink available, this type of stuff. So yeah, pretty cool. I thought I'd mention it if you guys are local, because I like to see these more local activations teams are doing nowadays and jumping on the bandwagon of what I believe is a pretty good idea. Hopefully though, they don't get fried, at least for the fans that attend to this one live, because I mean, they're not on a particularly good streak at the moment. Now, also wanted to mention this, speaking of Havoc and the Florida Mutineers, that Skies, formerly of Florida, has been noted here. If you guys zoom in, this was initially like a 5-second clip, and I was like, what is Havoc talking about? But what was meant to be noticed here is that if you zoom into the middle, you'll see Skies playing Control on Farm 18. And this has been a key talking point, right? Because Fortress Control, we know, is terrible. The pros obviously played all the maps and modes at the start of the game and determined what to play. They chose to play Fortress. It's obviously not particularly good. All the pros know Fortress Control isn't very good. They want to find a replacement. Now, Mikado Control was the other one that was considered at the start of the game. They decided in the end Fortress was better. But Farm 18, right, one of the beta maps, actually seems okay for Control. For hardpoint, it has like a ridiculous amount of hardpoints, not going to work. But for Control, it's apparently not bad. So Skies was spotted playing it last night, so presumably the subliners and other teams are testing out Farm 18 Control as a replacement for Fortress. So it probably won't be happening throughout the remainder of Major 3, but potentially through Major 4, Major 5 and Champs, we might have Farm 18 instead. I was kind of hoping at this time of the year we might actually have another map that we could potentially bring into the rotation, but Infinity haven't exactly been particularly quick on bringing new things into the title, so we might have to deal with old school maps from the very start of this game that still might actually be better, and the pros maybe didn't realise until now. Let's talk about ranked play then, because a lot going on there the last day or so. Thought this is funny as well here from Temp in the Paris Legion, or the Vegas Legion, apologies, that Toronto Ultra is appearing as a logo here. I think this happened the other day as well for Clayster. I think his was also appearing that he was on Toronto, but then it says Vegas Legion. I think they fixed it for Clay, so hopefully they'll fix it for Donny as well. But last night, the viewership was popping off on ranked play. Of course, there were some other streamers coming into the fray as well, but pretty much all of this great viewership last night, just for Modern Warfare 2 in general, was coming from competitive play. This is what frustrates me a lot about the way that Infinity Ward deal with the competitive scene in general, is that, like, you know, a lot of their viewership comes from the game itself, from the competitive part of the game. Like, no one's watching anyone play pubs or anything, and Warzone isn't in a great spot right now either. But bring ranked play in, we've got the pros playing it. Shotzzy had like 14,000 viewers last night playing ranked play. It was absurd, and part of the reason why it was great to watch was stuff like this. This reminds me an awful lot of what happens back in the World War II days. I remember World War II, the pros would play 8 sometimes, but what they would usually do is they would just go into ranked play, and the ranked system was good. All the pros were the very top rated players. It would put them in teams against other pros. Now, of course, in this, they're, well, partying up with 4 guys and hopping in, but the ranked system is often working in such a way that you can actually get 4 teams between, you know, 4 pro players playing in ranked play, which is really exactly what you want. As I say, back in World War II, you could hop in, and the only guys you would find on there in like the 3,000 elo range would be pros and very top amateurs, and therefore they could effectively play 8s, but ranked play would do it for them. Nowadays, you can't exactly get away with that because of all the hackers, right? Back then it was on console, so didn't have to worry so much about that. But nonetheless, right, the idea we've got Shotzzy, Hydra, Skies, Karma on one team, and then Clay, Drazah, I guess that's cut, is probably 0, and then Standy on the other team. Like, that's pretty cool stuff. Karma coming back into the fray. I don't know that people watched this and thought, damn, Shotzzy and Hydra is not an SMG duo we can allow right now. And it's the same thing with Dashy and Cell. Like, when you see Dashy and Cell play together, even Dashy and Drazah play together, and Shotzzy and Hydra, man, like, these guys are deadly, especially in these kind of more free-flowing 8s environments that ranked play creates. But I just thought it was really cool to see what's been happening the last few days. Yes, the anti-cheat and all the other issues are a big problem, but nonetheless, it's exciting that ranked play in terms of what it's doing for the scene and for the pro players is living up to a certain extent to some expectations. Now, I wanted to speak about what exactly this means for the OpTic Texas camp going forwards and where their roster stands, because they brought Ghosty in, they won that Game 5 up against the Los Angeles Guerrillas, but the question is, what happens down the line? I saw JoeDeceives make a video, what's their team next season? The fact that Pred, of course, is maybe in conversation to join at some point. It was meant to be the case before, didn't happen, then of course Huke joined the team. What I'd really love to see right now, and unfortunately I don't know yet when OpTic and Surge play each other. Hopefully they can play each other in the major, but I'd love to see a match right now of Pred and Surge up against the OpTic guys and just see what would happen between, because of course Pred would try to make a statement there, right, in that series to be the replacement for Huke next season. But if Huke does very well, then, you know, does Huke stay? And then you've got the question is, okay, does Ghosty's role remain, or do you make another change there? Depends on how well their season goes. But I think maybe you're saying, okay, next season will probably be Shotzzy, Dashy, Pred +1, but who knows? Huke obviously played phenomenally well in that series the other day against LAG, and Ghosty is seemingly stepping into a very important role for this OpTic team anyway, as Shotzzy goes on to say. He talked about the fact that Ghosty is now taking a lot of the kind of directional leadership in the game off Shotzzy's plates. Interesting that Shotzzy even says here that, like, he was effectively having to do a lot of the in-game leadership for this team, and iLLeY wasn't really doing it, despite the fact that I thought that was kind of iLLeY's job on the team, but that kind of seemed to fall off over the last few months or so. Shotzzy now feels much more comfortable, and therefore a player like Ghosty and his leadership and his communication in that role is, well, a player they want to have.
Like, Dan's more like the in-game leader, and then I don't know, it's like weird. It's like we bounce off really good. It's like I'm kind of like setting, I don't really know how to explain it, bro. We both like do it kind of, but yeah, I guess you could say he's more like he's good with his directions, bro. He's more vocal. Yeah, he's definitely way more vocal than me. It's because, like, I've always liked someone that's very, very vocal on things, so then, like, I could kind of play my game. But, like, whenever I was, like, the IGL, when we had, like, Inder on the team, I mean, Inder would still do his thing, but not as much as Dan does. And, like, with Dan's comms, he allows me to, like, focus on my game more, if that makes sense.
So sorry for the poor quality, but hopefully it got the picture across. But yeah, I thought it was interesting, right? So Ghosty, obviously, you know, not exactly an incredibly young player. He's been around a few years at this point, but nonetheless, still brand new to the scene. It didn't have a great first series by pure numbers, but it's expected, right? First series in the CDL, something happened to Beans in his first series. He got fried and then went off the next series. So we're excited to see what Ghosty can do here going forwards, but also in terms of the importance of that particular role. Shotzzy talks about the leadership that Eco is able to provide and the direction that he's able to give. And I thought some interesting commentary here on the Reddit, because I'm not so familiar with the Splice Halo roster that Shotzzy won the World Championship with back in 2018 on LAN. But there was some interesting discussion here kind of comparing Eco, who is the IGL of that Splice Halo roster, to kind of the type of player and leader that Shotzzy likes to play with. I wouldn't be surprised at all if Shotzzy is looking at that Splice Halo team and thinking, okay, that's the type of leadership and the directions that I would like to have my leader do. And maybe he wasn't really doing that, and now Ghosty is kind of doing a little bit of that, and Shotzzy feels much more free. Now he doesn't have to worry about doing any of that stuff in the game. So whether Ghosty is the right man here long term for OpTic, I think is an interesting question. But I think that at least Shotzzy has been relatively clear that that is the type of player that OpTic do feel like they need, and Shotzzy feels like he needs, because iLLeY was doing that for some time, we thought, right? He was, you know, the leader in the game. He was the system player. Like, we heard all this talk, right, when iLLeY was out with his thumb injury, and then when ProLuke came in, that ProLuke was doing so well because of the iLLeY system that he'd cultivated and created and all this type of stuff, and they were kind of getting by. But apparently Ghosty is now filling those shoes well, and that is of course a good sign for OpTic going forwards. But it does raise some questions, right? Because who knows what their team's going to be like next year. As we say, Pred will want to join. Whether he does join for Huke, I don't know. Whether there's another AR instead of Ghosty that ends up making more sense down the line. But the question is, if Ghosty is indeed providing a load of those important leadership in-game directional elements that Shotzzy seems to like, then if you were to replace Ghosty down the line, or even Huke down the line, you need to ensure those kind of, well, that responsibility is maintained by someone. And maybe that means they keep Ghosty for the long term. That would be very cool to see, because it'd be interesting if Ghosty, for example, he joined OpTic for a few months, they do okay but not spectacular, then he gets dropped and they make another change, and then Ghosty joins, like, you know, a middling team in the CDL. That's okay for his career for sure, but you know, it's obviously not what he wants to happen, and Shotzzy seems to value him very highly. They've only played one series though so far, so who knows what happens down the line. But given OpTic's intentions here, I do wonder exactly whether, because we talked about it the other day, could Dashy do more of that leadership type stuff. We know that Dashy kind of out of the game now is being the leader in a sense, right? He was the one that made the call to Ghosty. He was the one that was kind of considered almost like the general manager of the team now, because he was making the inquiries to Parasite, and I think it was Shotzzy was making the inquiries to Fellow, and then Dashy and Shotzzy made the call to bring Ghosty in. So they're doing a lot of the stuff on the leadership side outside of the game, but having Ghosty do it in the game is, you know, if that fits his personality and his playstyle, that's perfectly fine. But if Ghosty doesn't necessarily have the raw talent that a Dashy might necessarily have, and, you know, is Ghosty going to be on OpTic for as long as Dashy's going to be on OpTic? More than likely not. So maybe either Dashy needs to kind of, well, develop that skill set, or they might not exactly be forced to keep in a guy like Ghosty. But let's say there was an idea, right, that maybe next season you go Dashy, Shotzzy, Pred, and Simp, right, just as an idea. But if you do that, do you have those directional in-game leadership elements that Shotzi's saying that he values so highly? Or, you know, if you don't have Ghosty, then does that cause issues there? Because we thought the same thing with iLLeY, but then all of a sudden Shotzzy was doing the in-game leadership, and it didn't really make too much sense. So, I don't know, interesting question. I feel like maybe Dashy needs to develop that skill set as well to a certain extent to give OpTic more versatility in the future, but nonetheless, an interesting analysis from Shotzzy. And even as Dashy says, Cellium, us in ranked. I do wonder, right, what do you guys think about the future possibility of a Cell-Dashy duo up at some point? Now, I don't expect it to happen, really. It would be a weird timeline in which this was even possible. We did, of course, see the rumours around last season with him going to FaZe and all this, but now I think it's quite clear that Dashy will not be leaving OpTic anytime soon. So the only way in the next couple of years that Cellium and Dashy team up is if Cellium somehow joins OpTic, which I don't know if you could completely rule that out, right? It kind of depends what happens at FaZe, but as it stands, I mean, they just won the last event, right? So I don't know if this could happen anytime soon, but it's got to be said that Cell and Dashy have made quite the dynamic duo over the last few days. So OpTic are currently sitting at 1-0. Just wanted to look at their matches quickly to close out the stage here. So they played Toronto this weekend on Friday, then on Sunday they played the Minnesota Rokkr, so that's an interesting couple of games, and then their final week is tough. New York, and then they play FaZe. So those are the two games, of course, so far that Florida played, and they went 0-6 map count across the both of them, so not easy for OpTic. I did also have a quick look here at when they play Surge. They play Surge Major 5 qualifiers, and here, so May the 13th, Surge play OpTic. So if Huke is still on OpTic at the time, and Pred is still on Surge, then that will be a very interesting series heading into the World Championship around that time, if Pred was to, you know, get his way with OpTic, let's say, that particular series. Of course, it could happen, hopefully it does happen in an actual major tournament before then. But very much enjoyed your thoughts and all this in the comment section below. Just some interesting results here last night from said series. I think it ended like 3-1 in the end between Clay and Co. And like Hydra's team with Shotzzy and all that. But it was pretty interesting to see how this went. And also just to quickly mention from the Vegas Legion, I know that a few people have pointed this out to me, that Gravity has been spotted. He was there last year on Paris, right? On the Vegas Legion page on the actual game itself. I don't think Gravity is on this team at all. I don't know why he's there. I haven't heard anything of the sort that Gravity is here. It doesn't even really make sense as a sub either. Maybe there's something we don't know about here, but I think this is probably just a mistake on Infinity Ward's end. Not really sure. Very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care, and I'll see you next time.